right, welcome back to Patient Win Insider. I'm Nick Moen, and today I'm joined by Dr. Bill Layman, founder of Straighten Up Orthodontics in Clearwater, Florida. Dr. Layman is one of the few orthodontics in the country who pairs clinical precision with an MBA from Wharton, bringing a data-driven and entrepreneurial lens to how modern practices grow and adapt. He spent 20 years perfecting his craft while also advising startups, investing in innovation, and shaping how orthodontics integrates AI, equity, private equity, and evidence-based care. Thanks, Dr. Layman, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to having this conversation with you. Thank you.
Well, so I'm going to get right into it. You've built a thriving practice while staying at the forefront of business and technology. But how did your early career shape the way you practice and think about your growth today?
Gosh, early career. I remember starting out and actually looking for practices to join and just really couldn't find a good fit. So I decided to start my own from scratch. And a lot of my innovation, as innovation does, came from the necessity to evolve. The best space I could find was only 1,400 square feet. So having charts, having paper, film x-rays, which were cheaper at the time. I ended up going full digital with a paperless system in 2004 and with full digital radiographs, full digital photographs, everything that wasn't necessarily as ubiquitous as it is now. But that kind of put me on the path to really forcing myself to learn as much about the technological advances available to a private practice so that I could maximize the capacity of my limited square footage.
And what was it like starting a practice from scratch? I mean, that's quite an undertaking, right?
Starting a practice from scratch, if you really want to do it like I did, is the easiest thing you ever did. If you don't want to do it, it's probably pretty difficult. So it's just like anything. You ask any entrepreneur what their schedule is, and you can immediately tell that they love doing that. They're not doing it because it's easy. You don't start a business, you don't start a practice from scratch because you have many other options that would fit what your desires are. I loved it. I want it to be on my own. I wanted to go out there and just see what I was made of. I was a former military paratrooper. I was used to being surrounded, when we jumped into missions and things. So I actually set up a practice about a quarter mile from the low price, heavy marketing practice and from the established 30-year, been in the community forever practice, and just kind of tried to tweak out or create a niche for myself. Kind of like, if you have a busy restaurant that always has a waiting list, sometimes it is easier to set up beside that one because you do get some overflow, and it's on you to try to make sure you build that network of people from that small beginning. So that's what I did.
And would you compare, tell me if this is a crazy comparison, but thinking about like the physics of starting a business compared to the physics of orthodontics, like levers, arms, controlled force in order to shift things into a position that, has holistic and sustainable health. I mean, can you see it? Is there a way to compare the two that way?
No, not really. I'm not sure I understand the question fully. What do you mean by the levers and the physics of that?
Well, I think moving teeth into a healthier position for
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's the same, like, right, there's a lot of moving parts in a business as well. I mean,
Right. Okay. So drawing the analogy between starting from scratch, it's more like building a denture. You get to put the teeth kind of where you want them and see how it works. But, once you get into the practice at about that 2, 3, maybe 4 year piece, you start seeing that things maybe are a little bit off here, off there. So you slowly, just like we do, you slowly set up a system. You set up a engineering format, you actually apply some forces, and you move things to a better position, a healthier position. So drawing an analogy to orthodontics, yes, that can happen. That typically happens a little bit into the business because you have so much freedom over your systems and how you can set things up at the beginning. But as you get into it, it definitely becomes a nudge from here to there. Making changes in a business is kind of like trying to change a car on a tire going 100 miles an hour. You can do it, but you need some help, you need some support, and you need some really good systems to do it.
yeah. Well, and tools, right? Can you tell me
Oh,
about
yeah.
what sort of tools you're really excited about in the practice right now?
Tools as far as equipment or on the business
Yeah.
side?
Well, let's start with equipment.
Equipment, my goodness. You see behind me, I've got these 2 printers. These printers are designed to allow me to print aligners and retainers without the use of models. direct print aligners. Now, there are still some things we're working out. It's been around for a couple of years now, and all of the challenges when it comes to clinical use of these aligners, I feel like we've pretty much worked out. I've been very happy with the way they adapt. I've been very happy with the way that I'm able to reduce the attachments on the teeth, the number of attachments, because the trays grab the teeth a lot better, which is what attachments are for, because the thermoform trays don't grab the tooth as well, so you have to put bumps on it. With this tray, if you're able to grab the tooth from the neck all the way down to the incisal edge, you reduce the need for attachments. Now, there are still research projects being done. I'm currently doing a project with the University of Genoa in Italy. I'm doing a couple projects with the University of Florida, and that's more just intellectual curiosity. This process needs to be pressure tested. I appreciate the cases I've treated. I appreciate the results I am seeing, but nothing really is ever built in our profession on the results I am seeing. I want to see results from many different practitioners, and I want it to be pressure tested with other universities to show like, hey, we really put a spotlight on this and it's working like we think it does. So we're still in the process of building that knowledge. And I mean, even with Invisalign or aligners, any aligner company out there, we're still pressure testing aligners and pushing the limits and finding ways that it can work better on this and better on that. So, the fact that after about a year or two of FDA approval, direct print aligners are supposed to be as well vetted and as well understood as aligners that have been around for 30 years, unfortunately not where we are right now, but that's just a virtue of time performance.
Well,
Other things we're doing, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I mean, I'm just thinking about the risk of investing in a new tool without knowing if it's going to be beneficial yet. Like, how do you evaluate that?
Well, the beautiful thing about this tool, the tool being the printer
Yeah.
and the printer ecosystem, is I still print models. I still print splints. I still print my indirect bonding trays, a transfer tray. You can still print surgical guides, full dentures, wet try-ins. You can still use these. It's not a one-trick pony. I can still use this printer for everything else I need it for. So unlike some toys that we buy in our practice, it's a one-trick pony. If you buy it and it's not working great, then you got to throw it away. These things work beautifully. The speed of print for all the other items I use it for, it's still a great benefit for me. So it's kind of a win-win for me. I just happen to also be able to use it for direct print aligners. But yeah, I don't like spending money on toys either unless it's a really good one. In the office, all equipment purchased for the office should have some sort of ROI. That ROI can be in the form of increased capacity. It helps you move through a procedure or move a patient through their process in your office more efficiently, thereby creating room for other patients. It can reduce the cost that you are paying to service a certain type of procedure. That's an ROI, and you can add that up. And sometimes the ROI for me on this one right now is the fact that my intellectual curiosity is itched. I'm able to really, now there is a savings, there is a measurable savings because you don't have, now I don't have to make this model anymore and then put a thermoform on it. I can just make my tray and be done with it. So I reduce the waste by 71%, stuff I throw away. And I also reduce the cost in labor and the cost in materials. So there's a really good benefit, and I get to have a lot of fun doing it. So, at 52 and going to your office every day and starting to feel like you've got some things not necessarily figured out. That hubris is scary for me, but some stuff is a little more on autopilot than it was 20 years ago. But having something a little newer to jump into, to develop, to be part of is kind of fun. So I do like that part too.
I mean, you still have to kind of weed through the hype with new tools. I mean, or that printer, like, how do you know if it's good science, it's backed, and you feel confident in investing in it versus something that is talked about, but like, what do you look for? What are the key indicators that something's going to be worth it for you?
Key indicators is that people have done some projects on it when I first got into it. Key indicators are FDA clearance or European Class E, I think it is, clearance, Class 1 or Class 2 clearance in Europe. So, I mean, when a company has gone through multiple, in this case, on this company, global healthcare clearances, and people can say, well, those aren't that hard to get through, just this. Okay, fine. But it's a hurdle, and there's a lot of companies that don't get over that hurdle. So when a company gets over that hurdle, that's when I start paying attention that I can use it on my patients. But I still, as a practice owner, as a doctor, as well, the most important words that scare me is when a patient says, I trust you. Being that person, it's important that I dig into it. And sometimes there are things that I may not have I may not have as much data as a rubber dam over 100 years, but I have a lot of data and a lot of research and a community of people that we're all very much trying to find out if there are any issues that we haven't seen yet, because the initial dig does not show anything that is concerning to us.
Yeah.
So
Well,
now,
you're still trying to build trust with the patient. Yeah, I know it's a hard thing to work on, but how do you evaluate, like what goes into evaluating what condition they're in order to gain their trust?
the patient,
Yeah.
you just talk to them, answer their questions. If they ask for supporting data, you give them supporting data. And if you're using a company that doesn't have any MSDS sheets or any supporting data, well, I probably wouldn't be using that company. I want something that I can share with the patient. I mean, look at bisphenol A. I mean, we've been putting composites in patients forever. Now, I'm not a BPA fanatic. I'm just saying as an example, the fact that, there was a lot of great science on this. And then the public itself determined that this item may not be as beneficial as we thought. Once again, it's not a podcast about BPA. I'm not an anti or for. I'm probably some people watching this that are like, what? It's okay. It's just, it is a clear and present example that has been on CBS News and, ABC and everywhere, people being talked about. And this type of thing, I don't believe will end up in that position. But, at a certain point as a practitioner, you look at as much data as possible, you analyze it, you look at these healthcare agencies, and then you make a good decision. And if your patient asks for information, you provide it.
And do you think economic factors play a part in some of the research or what gets published?
I think in every environment, in every profession, if you're reading just a very small, select, biased set of articles, that can happen. I believe that the law of large numbers protects us from that, and a deeper curiosity of where data comes from protects us from that also. Because yes, of course, if you go into a free periodical that has 3 ads for the exact same thing they wrote an article on, I think you should be a little bit nervous. Or if you're on Facebook or if you're on a website and it's a white paper, I think you should take that with a grain of salt. That doesn't mean that it's skewed. It doesn't mean that it's improper science. It's just maybe I'll give that a closer look versus a pretty rigorous peer-reviewed journal. Now, the question is, the journal you're reading, do you believe that the peer review process is truly about the actual hypothesis, methods, materials, discussion, and conclusions, or is it about which ads are in the magazine? You have to make that decision yourself. And that there are journals that do an excellent job of still being very scientific method minded. And those are the ones you really want to focus on.
Yeah. I asked that because you're one of the rare cases where you're a dentist and you have your MBA, right? So you've studied trends or shifts in, the financial landscape or structural landscape in dentistry. What's your observations of the past 10 years there?
I think, my observation, I went to school 10 years ago because the HCA deal really kind of kicked off by KKR turned healthcare and private equity into bedfellows. It typically was most states, I think almost not all states, but great majority of states have that habit that a non-physician or a non-provider can own companies that provide healthcare. Well, the lawyers and the private equity firms found a way, I wouldn't say around that, but they found a way to create profitability from the healthcare, to mine the profitability from the healthcare companies and then be able to leverage up that profitability to then sell it off to the next LBO, leverage buyout, which essentially private equity, the evolution of the word private equity was corporate raiders. Essentially, Richard Gere in Pretty Woman was a private equity guy.
Yeah.
But back then, they demonized him because of the Nabisco thing with KKR and other deals that went pretty sour. In the 90s, it was all about leverage buyouts. We're not raiders. We're leverage buyout. It's an LBO firm. And then private equity, which is really what it is. I mean, it's money that comes from private markets, not from public markets. And so people got and also there was a huge scare with large dollar general partners, limited partners, things like that, pension funds that were a little nervous about all of the requirements that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, dictated on these publicly traded companies. And we saw what happened with Mattel, with Enron, with I think WorldCom. All these companies, had huge problems because they were public. So let's go private. So private companies typically would raise funds on corporate bonds, bank loans, maybe some equity, but not much. And so they found these vehicles to infuse tons of capital through private equity amounts. Now, a lot of people think that private equity means I've got a lot of people with a lot of money. They give me all their money, and then I go give that money to somebody else, and we try to get a return. That's not what happens. They give me all the money, and then I go out and take a loan out on the assets I'm about to purchase with a little bit of the money down that they gave me, and then we lever up to turn our $1 million into 10, or my 10 into 100, or 100 into $1 billion, and lever up, and then the banks get interest only. And so it's really all an interest rate game at that point, which is why you've seen the private equity deals slow down dramatically in the past 2 years. And I feel like next year, when I believe Trump is going to put in his Fed chair, when Chairman Powell leaves, the interest rate's probably going to go down 2 points. So you're going to see a big uptick in private equity deals at that point. So, but that is now doctors that sell to private equity firms, people that work with private equity firms, private equity fiduciaries that are there to get returns for their limited partners. Limited partners are essentially the big people that have all the money that contribute to a fund that a general partner runs. That house of cards is starting to show some weakness because, just like any business cycle, the business of orthodontics that I can speak to, I don't know as much about dentistry, it's probably mirroring closely, but the business of orthodontics, we're starting to see some cracks. We're starting to see what typically happens when one or two companies come in, they have a good position. There are some terrific OSOs in orthodontics that I think are foundationally very strong. Fortunately and unfortunately, there was a huge uptick in companies 19, 20, 21 that flooded the market because they saw that there was an opportunity. Yeah. So, some of the earlier companies went in on a blue ocean. They had plenty of opportunities, plenty of doctors were willing to sell, wide open equity markets, wide open interest rates at zero with quantitative easing, wide open number of doctors at that point that were interested in selling, and those early companies could tell really whatever story they wanted to tell, and nobody really knew the difference. I personally felt like at that time, and have hopefully got some stuff out there on the internet that shows back then, these things called recapitalizations. Essentially all that means is a company goes out and gets a new loan with new equity and new cash infusion to then flip it to another company. And the goal is that when you recapitalize, shareholders, whatever the recapitalization looks like, that new cash that comes in, shareholders hope to get a little bit of that, get a percentage of that. Well, unfortunately, I haven't really heard or seen a tremendous amount of end users or the people, the practice owners that sold, getting a lot of that money they were promised. That 10 or 12x on that extra 800,000 that was left in shares in the parent company. Not really. I mean, if it's happening, please correct me. Somebody send me messages and correct me. But I've said this on a few podcasts. I'm just not seeing it. And so that was a big selling point, was that money would show up later. So you could get 60% of your practice valuation, EBITDA times multiple, gives you your valuation. They give you 60% of that. The other 40% goes to shares. I'm not really hearing or seeing a lot of people getting that extra cash that they thought they were going to get. Now, that parlays me into the next concern that I have is a lot of deals happened in 2021 and 2002. We saw a spike in private equity deals in the orthodontic space. Once again, dental may be the same. I've only studied orthodontic space. And in the orthodontic space, that large number of deals created, one, a lot of extra cash for people and practices that went out, great, and then actually became part of a private equity firm. That spike was a little concerning because many of the people that I spoke to at that time that were asking for advice and questions about, should I do it, should I not do it, were very, very concerned that at that time, Joe Biden looked like he was, going to be president, beat Trump, taking Trump out of his second term. And Biden was running on a platform that included the possibility that we would lose capital gains tax rates and it would become an ordinary tax rate. Now, most of us are probably in the above 30, 35% in that tax rate, especially if you're a mature practice thinking about selling to an equity firm, private equity firm, or an OSO. And when they said that, that's what really drove a lot of the deals. It didn't happen. Fine. I'm not playing armchair or Monday morning quarterback. I understand. It was really scary at the time. I say that only because the spike in those deals, what happens at the moment of the deal, 60 to 70% cash out. Everybody's got a different deal. I'm just using a general average there that I've heard. Shares in the parent company, I'm going to get money later when we recap in 3 to 5 years when the current private equity sells to another one. Not sure that's happening. And number 3, as the selling doctor, likely, I signed an employment contract. Now that employment contract, from what I'm hearing and seeing, this is all private, so it's just stuff that I gained from interviews and discussions and things like that, was a 5-year employment contract. So that means in about 2026, 2027, there's going to be a large number, larger than normal number of doctors potentially leaving their practice. That spike, that economic driven spike because of the tax question has now created a little more of a cliff in that 26, 27 participation. Now, so what's going to happen in 26 and 27? Well, they need more doctors, because if these doctors are going to leave because they signed their 5-year contract and they're going to leave, now this is all conjecture. This is all me just, spitballing what might happen. Once again, if you're an OSO and you've got different data, I'm happy to be corrected. This isn't about me being right. This is about me sharing some things I'm seeing with my experience and background and conversations I've had with my friends in private equity and that are on the other side of these deals, and pressure testing this concept with them and making sure I'm not like out in left field. If that doctor is in, let's say, Des Moines, Iowa, and nobody wants to come to Des Moines, Iowa to take over that practice on that before that day your contract ends, what are you going to do? Are you going to leave? Is the OSO going to let you leave? Right. Can they make you stay? Is there anything they can do to make you stay? Your contract is complete. Is there anything in your contract that says you lose shares? You want to start looking at all these things.
Yeah.
And I want to share a personal story. This happened to me when I first started practice. And it is different being, 30, 31 years old versus being, 60, 62 or even 50s when you make this decision. But I was told I had a 2-year contract at a corporate office about 45 minutes from the office I was setting up from scratch, just to try to make some money a couple of days a week before things started to kind of take off. And they had another orthodontist in the office. It was good. We switched days, worked out great. And about 6 months out, maybe whatever the requirement was, maybe it was 4 months out from my contract cessation, I let them know, I'm sorry, thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity, but at the end of my contract, I will not be renewing. So my last day will be this day. And they were like, wow, really? Okay, no problem. Thanks. We understand. They came back to me about a week later and said, well, the other orthodontist really isn't looking to take on any more patients, so you have to stay. And I was like, I have to what? I can't. My practice is starting to grow, and I really need to be there more often. I'm not able to come over here anymore. My contract's over. They're like, and so, at first you're like, okay, they have to do that. And the thing they did to me really bothered me. And this is why I point this out and why maybe I'm a little biased when it comes to this cliff that's likely going to occur in 26 and 27. They said to me, well, we can't make you stay, but if you leave, unfortunately, we're going to have to report you for abandonment of your patients. We can't make you stay. And so that personal experience, hopefully, once again, hopefully it's never going to happen and nobody would ever do that. But these guys did. And this was way before private equity. This is 2005, 2006, not way before, but very much before OSOs and things like that. And so that strategy was happening. So if you're an orthodontist or maybe even a dentist and you've got a contract coming up and you're wondering who's going to take my place when I leave, my sincere hope is that whatever company or corporate entity you're currently seeing patients for has a great plan in place. And some of you may still get stuck. And so please start thinking about that so that you don't come down to the wire and you have plans and all these things and you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You're going to do exactly what the contract tells you to do. And you may still have some trouble down the road on that. So that kind of concerns me about the current state of what we're seeing. Yeah. Now, there's other items, but that has a personal piece that I wanted to share with you.
Well, it seems predictable based on the evidence. Like, how do you prepare for? It's like a labor bubble, then, right? That's
it can be.
Yeah. So, how do you prepare for that? What would you recommend?
If you're an OSO, how do you prepare for that?
Well, if you're an orthodontist, I think it's
you just need to start having the conversation ASAP.
Yeah.
Once again, you might actually be the one that's in a pickle. Because if they may not, they legally likely cannot, unless there's something. Now you can check your contract and see if you have the freedom to actually leave. You may not even know that. It may be in your contract that if we can't find a doctor, you're not going anywhere. And so that's called something else that I'm not going to mention. That then you're really stuck. Yeah. And essentially you're working, you're getting paid for it, but you're stuck. That's almost like a stop loss in the military.
Yeah.
So that would be concerning if you don't know that. If you don't know if that's in your contract or not, I would definitely be looking for that. And if you can confirm that you can leave when you want, they contractually won't be able to keep you to stay. They won't be able to make you stay. But at the same time, they may have some other tricks up their sleeve that could negatively affect. And even if you never plan on practicing again, I don't think any of us truly want to ever have something in front of the board that says we were abandoning people.
Right.
If you're like, I'm not going to practice anymore anyway, that's still nasty.
Yeah.
You don't want to leave your patients in the lurch. If most people out there, I would dare say 100% of the people out there, if you really talk to them, they really don't want to just leave patients. So I would start looking into that if you already haven't. And once again, maybe I'm behind on this and everybody's already figured all this out and they're working on it. Great. But I haven't heard a lot of it.
How does this reflect on the core values that you have with your team? You're talking candidly with colleagues in the field potentially right now, but how does it affect your team, or what are the core values to keep your team there in the first place?
Respect, training, not giving in a lot of times. Because I think I've made that mistake when I was younger, is like, well, if I give them a little bit more of what they want, they'll like me. I don't know if I'm pretty sure that's not the case, and once again, a lot of people right now are probably shaking their head, and that's good. Yep, that's right. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But hopefully there's somebody that's like, oh, maybe I am doing that. And because it sounds good. It sounds good for a moment and it feels good for a moment. But over the long haul, it turns into a real nightmare. And that's how people end up leaving, because eventually you got to put your foot down. And so just that core respect. I like to look at my office kind of like a military team, because I was in the military for a while. I almost look at it like a squad where, I'm the squad leader, but my job is really to remove boundaries for my teammates. My A team leader, my B team fire team leader, and they're soldiers themselves. If I can help get stuff out of the way for them so they can have the highest and best success, then they're going to help their team members have the highest and best success. Then we all just kind of work out real well. Harry Truman had my favorite quote I think I've ever heard, where he said, "It's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets the credit." And so that's kind of a core value that I like to think about.
I love that. Well, what's one piece of advice, based on, respect or building the team, when you first started, or and maybe you didn't know when you first started your practice and now you've learned 20 years later, but what piece of advice would you give yourself or somebody in your position in an orthodontist that wants to start a practice?
Get a great office manual and stick to it. Mm-hmm. I've made the mistake in the past of having favorites, somebody that I thought I really needed to have, and I kind of bent over backwards, and I kind of gave them not favorable days off, kind of gave in, and that turned out to be a real problem for me. So I would avoid doing that. Once again, as much as it feels like it's working really well at the moment, it ends up backfiring on you, because then they want a little bit more, or another team member you weren't even aware of that you really like as a team member, they leave and you're like, what happened? And they're just offended. It's so avoiding some of that favorite child syndrome is maybe a way to call it. I don't mean to belittle team members. They're obviously grown adults, but I think as far as a psychological term, the favorite child syndrome hopefully makes sense, and the way to understand the psyche of that thing I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, equality and respect. You have to, you have to have a level playing field for everybody. Well, so if people wanted to learn more about your practice or speaking work or connect with you online, how do they find you?
Well, I mean, you can go on Straighten Up Orthodontics on any social media site. We have S as in straighten, U as in up, ortho, suortho.com. Got a lot of information there. My email, Dr. Bill, DRBILL at suortho.com. I got to say that real slow because SU Ortho can sound like FU Ortho, and that doesn't work out so well for me. So I apologize. So S as in straighten, U as in up, ortho.com. Happy to answer any questions or love to see any comments. I know I talked about possibly some inflammatory items, but I am more than welcome, more than happy to discuss and learn from anybody else's experience and just share maybe a little background on more of why I came up with some of the things I said.
Thanks, Dr. Layman. It's been great having you on, and I like your, you sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Nick.